Hello, and a very warm welcome to This Woman's Work, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing women, the fantastic jobs they do, and the paths that have led them to where they are today. I'm here today with the Genever Sisters. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Right, there's three, so this is taking me into very uncharted territory, but we're going to go with it. And we're going to start with Kate. Kate, as the oldest of the three, can you explain to the listener what it is you three do together, and then tell us a little bit more about you?
So we are three daughters, which is our Instagram account name, and but in theory we are a family of farmers in Uffington. I'm the eldest, then there's Susan, and then there's Liz, and the three of us work with our mum and dad, Paul and Yvonne, and we farm a traditional mixed farm, which means we have cows and sheep and combinable crops and
Wildlife.
And lots of wildlife, yeah, and also we have a meat box scheme, which is the meat that's supplied into the pub that people might already know about.
And you can order it direct as well, can't you?
And
For anyone obviously listening, so
yeah,
we're
Available to all.
Available to all.
And then as Kate Genever, I always talk about myself in the third person, which is weird.
That comes with age though, doesn't it? It comes with age.
No, it's always been like this.
Oh, right.
As Kate Genever, the artist, I work all over the country and internationally, often in marginalised communities, helping and supporting people to reflect on and cope with change.
Wow. Right, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is.
But we'll move round to your
back,
sister to that. So, Susan.
Yeah, so I help on the farm, not as much as these two hands-on, but I do the account side of things and general admin and take a lead on selling the meat boxes. But really...
And Instagram, don't forget
and
your
yeah,
social.
I do the Instagram too.
Yeah.
Historically, I was in international development. That's what my degree and where my career was going before I had children.
Yeah.
As we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Career obviously took a nosedive, and I think it was quite interesting, which we might talk about more later, about you saying you sacrificed your career for your husband, which you do, but I don't think you realise you're doing it at the time.
No, of
you
course
go
you don't.
into it, don't you? So anyway, I finished in international development, and we moved back when Gilbert was born to be back on the farm. And then I've had various jobs since I've been back here. Worked at Coptill for quite a long time, which was great. But now I work for the National Association of Agricultural Contractors, which is like a trade union body.
Yeah.
But just for contractors. So it's like the NFU, but it's specific to agricultural contractors.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, that's what I do
Wow,
as
okay.
a part-time job, as well as helping on the farm.
So hi, yeah, I'm Liz. So I also help on the farm. I tend to do more on the stock front, so I do quite a lot of the marketing of stock, so selling and lambs
Okay.
and cattle and various things. But my main role, my main job outside the farm is a beef and sheep system consultant, which what does that mean? That means I spend a lot of time talking to people in fields about how to graze things differently. I'm doing quite a lot at the moment on regenerative and biological farming systems, so
Wow.
how we can get more soil biology, more health into the soil. So, and part of the work is mix or trying to bring some of those techniques back to the home farm as well. So I'm involved in various projects trying to, how can we use some of that approach here and trying to negotiate family members in, not necessarily the ones here, other family members in slightly different approaches to farming.
I was going to say.
Which I think is important to say, that as a family, or as the three of us, we're really interested in how we can improve and bring more nature back onto the farm and more diversity back onto the farm, and are keen to build that as initiatives that also welcome people to understand and explore more about things to do with agriculture.
42% of the population that work in agriculture are women
Are they?
in the UK. In wider across the globe, it's a lot higher. So
Right.
the part of the bit I do other stuff on is about getting, well, it's not even equality, it's just getting women's voices heard within different situations.
Yeah.
And that, a lot of the time, it's because within a most of the work has been directed towards the male farmer, so the head of the household type approach.
Yeah.
And part of it is trying to get people, or women in particular, to reclaim the fact is their voice is equally as important.
Yeah.
So women are out there in the farming industry, they're just not, some
It's
of
been
them aren't.
marginalised.
But the debate is where some of it is about bravery, standing up and wanting to have your voice heard. Some of it is about the timing of events. Like they did a huge bit of work in Australia about making sure the timing of farmer events isn't in the evening when you have your requirement is to be with children.
Yeah.
So a lot of the industry has been directed towards males.
Yes.
So
yes.
whether I suppose it is marginalised, but the fight has to come from the women as well. Do you mean? So there's the bit that irritates me currently is if you look at the Farmers Weekly, there's a big campaign that's been run by Farmers Weekly about women in agriculture being led by a man. Like, in what world? And there's also what tends to happen is they have Instagram posts that are 20-something-year-old women with shorts sitting on a silage clamp. That isn't representing women in agriculture.
No.
As my friend said, it's not representing Brenda who's turned up covered in shit because she's been feeding calves.
Yeah.
That means so it is about being recognised, and so I have every time we go to meetings and farmers are referred to he or she is come. So we within the industry have to be better at challenging
And
the
trying to be
behaviour.
more visible.
Yeah, and it's not about. I suppose some of it is about being argumentative, but some of it is just about being present and saying, I'm not having it anymore.
Yeah.
We have every right to be here. Thanks.
But I don't know what the numbers are, but girls on agricultural courses now, I think, outweigh, I can't remember the numbers, but there's a massive uptake in girls signing up to agricultural
Really?
degrees and courses.
And what's interesting in the regen world is that there's more women. So
Right.
there's a lot more women within the audience. There's a lot more diversity. It's not just a male, stale, pale type of person that turns
Yeah.
up. The creativity is more interesting when you've got more women in the room, and they're the different questions and different approaches, and a lot more interesting rather than men appear. I do quite a lot of farmer meetings where you have all male audiences, and they're always really challenging in terms of questions or that willingness
And
to
are
be
you the
vulnerable.
only woman in
Yeah,
that?
it's the speaker, which is just normal.
Yeah.
But the ability to be vulnerable in that room is impossible. We actually get women in, the vulnerability starts to actually provide some
Yeah.
really interesting conversations and change happening. So we can build it in, and as they get more confident with me, the vulnerability starts. But initially, it is very much we're all here.
Combative.
Oh, and just
Alpha male.
yeah. But I've been trained to deal with that, and that's fine.
By who?
My dad.
And how far into it all do you think you, I'm trying to think how to word this, embraced your feminine, rather than doing what had always been done in a masculine way? How far into, I'm saying, were you a child, were you a teenager, where you thought, okay, you were aware of yourself as a woman and how, as a woman, you could influence things slightly differently?
The last few years you realise the power of the feminine energy,
Yeah.
and I think that is more of a conscious thought, but that's only in the last few
I was going to
years,
say, yeah.
because you do realise the power of that is just more subtle, but it is powerful to use it.
I think, and also I think it's a question maybe we can't answer. The interesting people to ask is the people that come and work with us or we work alongside. So people sometimes come and help us with cattle when we TB testing or whatever, and they're often, you can see them going. I remember Will Barker saying to me, do I ask you? Do I just help you? What do I do? And I'm like, like not knowing what to do. So not wanting to not be offensive, really respectful,
Yeah.
but also recognising that traditionally a woman wouldn't be lugging something across the yard or wouldn't be pushing a bullock up into a trailer or whatever it is.
But what I always do is we then track back and we go back to little Kate and little Susan and little Liz and find out what you were like, what you're into. So we're going to start with Kate. So but in each of you as sisters, what were you like? What were you into? What was childhood like?
What was I like?
Yeah, what were you like as a person, as a young child?
I was always into art and drawing and making things. Didn't pass my 11 plus, so I went to the secondary modern in Stamford and
Enjoyed secondary?
only when I got to about the age of 13, because we had a girl in our year that bullied the entire year.
Oh yeah.
And when she left, that's when I think my brain kicked in, and then I really enjoyed school from that point and came out. I did well at school.
Fantastic.
And then I went to art school.
I was going to say, did you go to
sixth form, then art school, then I did an art degree, and then eventually I did an MA. Yeah.
Wow. And at all this same time, you're still
Working on the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did your parents react to your artistic?
I mean, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I think that we should consider ourselves to be very lucky, because we have parents that were very encouraging of whatever we wanted to do, and always said that to go and do what we wanted to do, and that we could always come back to the farm if we wanted to, but not to rely on the farm being there as a thing, just to
Okay, so they very much wanted you to find your thing.
go and do our thing.
Wow.
And I had a really great art teacher at secondary who they liked and encouraged me to do stuff. And yeah, I guess I worked on the farm on the weekends and all of my holidays through school, sixth form, all my degree. I used to come home every holiday and work on the farm. And it is a family joke that they used to plan the lambing and the busy times around half term and Easter holidays and stuff.
Which is why they would have been there in school.
They would have been anyway, but school holidays. But at that point, so the kids, all of us, would turn up and work all the holidays.
And also they needed it probably, didn't they?
Yeah, of course, busy
it was
times.
Vital resource, yeah.
Yeah, so I worked my way through all of college and all of those things.
Fantastic.
And then when I first came out of my first degree, I came back to the farm for a bit and worked on the farm, and then left, and then was on a temporary part-time contract, a year contract. So every holiday I used to come back still and work on the farm. So I drive tractors all summer.
So in terms of, you said you travel a bit.
Yeah.
So how does that look then for your sort
Time?
of, like a month or a how does your
For work now?
So what's the split like?
It just depends entirely on the week and the month.
Okay.
So if it's lambing, I'm here, and then
so certain times you're absolutely
and because I
open to
freelance, so I can I move my diary around most things.
and travel
Because
as
some
well?
of us are more fixed in what we have to do with jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I travel around it. Yeah, and I work all over the country. Yeah.
So what exactly are you doing when you are abroad then? Just for
Looking.
That's a big question. Looking. There's a lot of looking in my
you
life.
said drawing.
Drawing, looking. Exploring. I depends on why I'm away. So it could be a commission to make artworks.
Yeah.
It could be a commission to work in response to a place. It could be so I have a long-term commission into West Hull, in a community in West Hull, and that's looking at how can arts and culture support what already happens in that area.
Okay, so little Susan then. What was little Susan like?
Well, I'm the middle child, so for all middle children out there, I don't really think I need to say much more.
Oh,
I didn't really fit into the traditional mould, I don't think. Like Kate did a lot of work on the farm. Or as a teenager, I remember Kate and cousin Sally being on the farm, whereas that wasn't really my thing. I was like off.
You love sport.
Yeah, doing sport and.
So you were more
travelling.
in it with the school thing and your mates and all that kind of thing, really? Are you off
Well, we had like a gang in the village. We were like the cool gang that like people would come into the village to like hang out with us. So, but when we were older, like I didn't really do that much work on the farm. I think because Kate and Sally were doing a lot of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of, well, that job's been taken, so I just kind of
Went to Woolgrowers.
Yeah, I got jobs in summer holidays and stuff off the farm, so I never really had that solid base of farming from
Practical.
Practical base of it from a young age.
And also, if your parents are encouraging you still to follow your own path, you weren't being pushed down into farming, were you? You were being allowed to.
No, there was never
as
any.
far
I mean, there was always lambing, as we were saying, and harvest where you were just expected to be there, but it was never kind of drilled into us that it was expected. So school-wise, I was the first person to pass the 11 plus in the family. Just putting it out there. So I went to the high school on a full scholarship. It was fine. It was school, lots of sport, which was fab, but I didn't love it. So I went to Stamford College to do and that's where I like really flourished to do my A-levels.
Okay.
Loved it.
A-levels in?
Sorry?
I want to know what you did A-levels in.
You
have to tell me we don't do grades on this woman's work.
History,
you just got A-levels.
geography and English literature.
Okay.
So,
with a view to...
Well, I then went on and did geography with African and Asian studies at Sussex University.
Oh, so you buggered off then?
Yeah, I left. And then stayed on and did an MA in what was then called Third World Rural Development, which it wouldn't be called that now, so like international development.
Wow.
And then went straight into volunteering for a charity, development charity. Worked my way up there, then got another job with a Natural Resources International. So we would bid to win work from the EC and DFID that was now is no longer.
Oh yes, yeah.
No longer a thing, department, and would travel around Africa and Asia and a little bit of Latin America going to projects that we were working on. So yeah, I properly went away, disappeared off and did my own thing, and then did that, as I said earlier, had the first child and then came back to the farm and my world closed in around me.
Liz, little Liz, as you are, you're the littlest in age of...
Yeah, I was never that little. So I was the youngest, and there's quite a big gap. So
I was going to ask that. So what is the age gap?
9 years between me and Kate, and 6 years between me and Susan. So I was not quite on my own, but there was a bit of a gap between.
So you really were kind of doing it, and then Liz came along and...
Yeah, so she wasn't a middle child for 6 years.
Maybe
but
that's why they had you, because I was so disengaged. They were like, we need another baby.
So I came and was really poorly, really early on. So I'm spoilt. I accept I am spoilt because of that. Indulged, but was painfully shy as a young kid, and probably was until I was about 19. But I was absolutely adored animals, would like spend all of my time with animals if I could. Went to the high school as well, stayed on to sixth form, then went to Nottingham University to do, I'm an academic so I love school.
Wow.
Don't really like people, but I'm happy in books. And then went to
That
Nottingham.
did change.
A bit.
You like people now.
Sort of come back, it's gone down again. Anyway, so I went to Nottingham University to do animal science, so that's sort of agriculture but with a focus on animals, and that's when I sort of realised, because the high school's quite difficult if you're not going to be a lawyer or a doctor, or you're always seen as, and there's always really, really bright people.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden then at that degree I suddenly went, actually I do know because I was really passionate about the subjects and what I wanted to do. Had a year out, went travelling, spent 4 months in Australia, 2 months in New Zealand.
On your own, or?
Yeah, went out on my own and then met up with other people when I was out there. I really randomly won air mile tickets, so I got my ticket free.
Oh, wow.
I still don't know what competition I entered to get them.
Something to do with the bank.
Yeah, and really weird. Anyway. So went out for 6 months, came back, interviewed for a PhD at Cambridge, got that in animal welfare behaviour, so did 3 years at Cambridge, and then just as I left Cambridge, I then got a job working for a levy board which supports farmers, so like a bit like a trade association but not quite.
Yes.
So I was writing up and with a new job, and then that got me to Milton Keynes. So I was there for 7 years, and then moved back to the village in 2012. And then worked for that organisation, and then became an independent consultant. Left them December 18, so started my own business January 19.
So, but one of my questions is always kind of what next, and that obviously feels like quite a poignant question because there's obviously a legacy element here. So obviously your grandfather built on what he was given, your dad and his brother did what they could to build, and obviously you're now sitting here trying to obviously expand it in your own different ways as well, and almost not just within the village. Obviously you're talking about almost like as Genever farmers and the impact you can have on farm, do you know what I mean, the wider farming community. So the farm's almost extending beyond farm, isn't it, really, with you
with
guys,
the work that we do elsewhere.
Which, I don't know, that feels really female to me. That feels like, do you know what I mean, being able to see beyond.
Well, some might call it very clever diversification. So we're working in different sectors and in different geographies as a way to earn money and make a living, because we couldn't all live on the farm and earn from the farm. It's just an impossibility. And so there is a diversification.
Well, Lizzie's actually quite a good driver in. Actually, we've got to have a meeting about this, about bringing new initiatives into the farm, and it's very much, I think we all believe, we want to leave the farm better than we found it, and that's not to say we haven't inherited a great farm, we have, but there's lots of progress, I don't know whether that's the right word, well, movement towards the regen side of things, and that we do need to look after our soil, and we do need to plant trees, and we do need to look after hedgerows. And that's just a shift, I think, in an agricultural way.
Global context.
You know, we've moved from industrial farming where we just need to produce, and now it's
no longer working.
No, we have to look after what we've got, otherwise we're not going to be able to just keep producing.
So it's not necessarily about expand, it's about just taking better care.
Exactly.
And making what you have got work better and smarter for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I know you have a little life in you yet.
So Lizzie does a lot with the regen agricultural side of things, and we're bringing in lots of initiatives, and we're looking at soil health. Last year we planted over 900 trees, which were funded by the Woodland Trust. So, and that's my interest really, the environmental side of things, and being involved in that.
So we've got on the farm at the moment, we've just got just over 4,000 metres of hedges. So on a relatively small amount of farm, it's quite a lot of hedge.
Yeah.
And then we've just got some money to put in another 800 metres of hedge, and then do some other management. So hedges in this bit of the world are quite a traditional way of marking field boundaries, but also in the funding pot, they're a cheap way of getting a fence. So if you put a hedge up, you get a fence paid for. So we're using it not only to put the hedges up, but also to improve the infrastructure within the farm.
Okay. No, but that is driven by a
broken down fence.
It's driven by a want of nature and also practically wanting to farm animals.
Yeah.
And needing a new fence. And then the bid I've just put in, so for the sustainable farming incentive, is to put more wild bird feed in, and also more sort of insect food. So it's quite interesting, like I drive down the lane with Mum and the gate, and she always talks about there's not as many birds down the lane as there used to be.
Oh.
And what's interesting in that generation is that they remember when there was lapwings here, and they remember when there was all of this bird life, and we're now to a point where this is the new normal. So actually, if we can put some bird feed in, can we get those birds back to the levels that they remember? And I've put in the process of putting another bid in, which is the focus would be on lapwings and corn buntings, which are a focus species for these areas. So they should be here and they're not here. So I'm interested in how our agricultural system has led to that demise, but what can we do to bring them back?
whilst also growing food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By being a productive farm.
And so a lot of those areas are on bits that are struggling, bits of the farm that's struggling, or near a watercourse, so we don't necessarily want to farm really close to the watercourse.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we're using those options to not only add bird food, but also to make farming those fields a bit easier.
Yes, yeah.
We're going through a period within the farming community that subsidies are reducing, and so this is another. By 2027 there'll be no farm subsidy for producing food. So at the moment we just get subsidy for doing. Yes, we have to keep the land in good agricultural condition, but that's about it, and we get money for that.
Yeah.
That stops in 2027. So that's focused people's minds to going, right, we were getting this lump of money, we're now not. So how can we either get that money back by doing different schemes, or how do we diversify our business? Most beef and sheep farms would not be making a profit. The only reason they're actually existing is because of subsidy. So when you take that subsidy out, the reality is going to be frightening.
And
And
people
that's
still think they pay
3
lots of
years
money
away.
for their food.
And that's not about. Anyway, this is a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
But that's about how we've developed farming systems that are really expensive. So people are not paying enough for food is one argument. We're producing food in quite an expensive way. So
Lots
there's
of
somewhere in
inputs.
between where we've got to look at both sides. And that's a lot over machinaried, different. Anyway, there's
And
loads
how
of
far
ways.
do you get involved in these chats? And so I'm guessing this is you of the sisters that'll go into these kind of meetings, and how far up the
Well, Elizabeth
Change.
is leading in the country, I would think, on some of
No,
these
but in terms of
things.
influence, do you mean at governmental
yeah.
level?
So all these chats that are going on.
Yeah, so I've for something else I do, I've just put in a test and trial bid. So the test and trial is an initiative that's been run by DEFRA to gather ideas. So if our idea gets to the next level, then that might influence future policy.
Right.
So you can get involved. I also organise things where we're building a community for farmers who are doing new things to exchange ideas.
Yeah.
So some of this can't just be policymakers telling us what to do. Some of it is we have to come up with our own solutions.
And is that quite? Are ideas embraced, or is there an element of this is just me asking really random questions here? But I don't know, do people get a little bit protective, or I don't want to share ideas because I don't want,
So I think about this in any
well,
sector.
that's what I am thinking. I think
So any sector, you're going to have people that want to progress and have forward-thinking innovation, and you'll have bits of the sector of people that want it to be like it was in the 1960s. And there is a spectrum of all of that in any sector. And so it's no different for agriculture. So of course there will be farmers that don't want anything to change, and they still want to drive really big tractors up and down and not think about lapwings. And then there'll be others that want the most extreme, which is to take the tractors completely off and rewild their farms.
Yeah.
And so you know.
But
What
the-
about
the
sort of a
question
level
is
of
change.
competition?
Is
though?
change.
This is where I'm thinking as well. Are farmers competitive with each other? As in
When you go
Depends.
sort of through the other side, no. It's a really open. So the regenerative type community is very open generally. So they're willing to share and exchange ideas and all of that. But that moves into it can move into a sort of a definition of positive mental health, which is an openness and encouraging people around you. A lot of the farmers that I work with is mental health is the stumbling block. They're not in the right frame of mind to make some of these shifts. So their attitude towards change is it comes from fear, it comes from lots of things, but it generally comes from a lot of being able to control the negative thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Blimey.
So if you look at there's relatively new survey data which is self-reported, but anxiety levels are anywhere between 50. I think women are 68% self-diagnosed as anxious in some form.
In agriculture, what's the stats in
Every day.
everything
That's
else?
like a day. Yeah. How you feel.
And then
daily.
depression is sitting at self-diagnosed of the people who responded to the survey is sitting at 30-40%. So with mental health, but again, I'm embedded in the agricultural society, but mental health is a massive crisis everywhere. But when you've got an industry that has to make significant change in 3 years, and nobody's really talking about how to deal with the mental health bit, it's going to be really challenging.
Change is hard for anything,
Yeah.
isn't it? We all struggle with change, let's be honest about it.
And we talked about the vulnerability piece, which is until those people are vulnerable, they won't change.
Someone seeing someone instigating change
It's
and
the
it's
change,
working,
isn't it? Yeah.
And that
someone
is-
can then hopefully then go, okay, well that's not my farm type, but
how do I change?
okay, change can
But
be
I
good.
think what's interesting is the overlap between the work that I do within communities and the work that Elizabeth does within the agricultural sector, and recognising the amount of work that's already done around resilience and choice and change that are happening for lots of communities, and how does that work and that knowledge and experience, how can it can be moved sideways into understanding agricultural communities. And all of us will know, if we've had anything dramatic happen to us in our lives, that how you come to cope with choice and make a resilient, effective, empowered choice isn't something that you can do straight away. You have to process, and you have to accept loss, and you have to grieve, and all of those things before you can come to a place of choice.
What's the best part of farming as you do? Let's not talk about your individual careers. What's the best part of this?
Of life or farming?
Of farming. I'm going to keep it specific because I'm trying to recalibrate my questions as I'm going.
Space.
Outside.
Yeah, being
outside
outdoors.
space.
I don't think you realise how outside I am until I speak to someone who isn't. And if so,
Outside, you mean literally outdoors? How,
Yeah, so
how physically works? Yeah.
Chris, my partner, he will go an entire day without going outside, and that would just drive me mad. Like the idea of being inside all the time, like not to be out and about doing stuff, and not just doing stuff, but being in nature, seeing what's going on, looking at the weather, all of that stuff is just fundamental to who I am. But back to what is my dream day is standing outside with a group of farmers talking about things. So
do you have meetings outside?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
So, and that's because we can look, you're observing, you're connecting, you're talking, you're doing all of that stuff, and everybody is in that community is generally happier standing outside in full. Do you mean it can be pissing it down? We're in full waterproofs and we're fine most of the time.
I think on a good day, and coming back to your question about what do I enjoy about it, the best part of it. The best part of it is when everybody's on form and we're all in a good mood, and there's family and no, probably not, or that there's people helping, or we're all there and we're all getting involved and we're all stuck in and we're all doing what we're meant to be doing, and everybody is happy. That is
once a year.
That is an occasional thing, but and we're outside and we're busy, that feels good.
My other fascinating fact is that 80% of the world's food production is produced from small holdings. So an argument that's banded out a lot is that we can't do this because we need to produce food. It's like actually industrialised chemical-based farming is not producing.
No, but is that because small holdings in countries like Africa and India, they cover a vast
but it's still they're responsible for feeding a lot of people. So it's just
mostly women.
And mainly women. So it's this movement away from we need chemicals and this way of farming to feed the world. It's like, well, actually, the world is feeding itself quite well. It's sort of quite a colonial type view.
Yeah.
It's a patriarchy.
Why is it not talked about more then? Is that just
because we're run by a patriarchy and we're run by the chemicals companies?
The chemical companies.
And we're a capitalist system. I mean,
they want the world to think that it's all revolving around.
That they're needed.
Or that there's a problem and therefore you have to find a techie or chemical solution. I mean, it's just a big capitalist.
So if you think back to the well-known within the geography world or sort of developing countries, the Green Revolution. So it was lauded as this amazing success at how it has increased yield. But in the same message they gave the seed, they also gave the chemical fertiliser and they gave the pesticides. And so you moved a lot of communities away from an indigenous way of growing with seed saving and recycling of nutrients to this chemical-focused, profit-driven way of farming. And so a lot of the work is now how do you get people unhooked from that? So it's an addiction, and how do you get people off it?
But what's the worst part of farming? When is it a bad day?
When
I
it's
think it's
raining.
important, to discuss
Mud.
the.
When it's raining and it's cold and you've got to do some task, and I have Raynaud's, which means I get dead fingers, so
I get that. But
that's difficult. When everybody's fed up, when nobody's in the mood, and it's shit weather. It's just shit weather.
and
Well,
what time in the morning
the
is this
weather.
as well? So you're up
It's
at,
probably we start normally between 7 and 7:30, so
and it could be dark, wet, raining, cold,
the winter, mud, rain.
Darkness.
and you've got to do it. You can't even put a sick day.
I remember one day it was
And when
lambing,
you're poorly, and then you're still doing it.
it was lambing time, and it was I remember thinking as I woke up, is this going to be the morning where I find a lamb frozen to the mud? So that's
Oh.
like they're the proper dark days.
When and I think the worst thing, actually not that's the worst thing in terms of what you getting up every day, but the thing that's absolutely the worst is when you're trying your best for animals and you're doing things with animals, and then
Something horrible
obviously
happens.
something horrible happens and they die, and then those are the worst days. So because you're in charge of that thing, you
and
have
you
a
don't
responsibility.
ever get used to that.
I think if you got used to it, you would be a really, really terrible farmer. I think you have to find empathy at all points, else you couldn't do it.
And I think some of that comes, farmer support in those days are important, because there is that sort of, everybody has that, we have livestock and some of those will die, that is the
So
reality.
you've seen some really not nice things.
Yeah.
But you need to be within people or with people who've also seen them, and that's not about they're in a worse situation than us, it's just about someone who can understand that.
Yeah.
Because the irony is, yes, we sell meat boxes, but that
And
so
that I'm
animals-
vegetarian.
and that she's vegetarian and I appear to be turning plant-based on Zoe. But a lot of our business model is based on animals dying. We just don't want them to die when they don't need to die.
Yeah.
Or because we might have made a mistake or something's like an
Yeah.
accident's happened. It's just
Well, you don't want them to
demoralising.
suffer.
Or the
do
weather's
you?
shit and
Yeah.
it's affected them, and we've made the choice to bring them into the world, and then they have to.
So yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
horrible.
responsibility, and it does
It's
certain
life,
days.
isn't it? Responsibility for
And
life.
there is, for me, there is a bit of a switch off that you have to, or you just, gets too much.
Yeah.
What do you think's the worst, Susan?
Honestly,
Every day.
Honestly.
Every day.
I think being in an environment that you can't walk away from is really difficult, because anybody else in a normal job, if they didn't like it, they'd go,
I'm gonna do it
actually,
today,
I'm
yeah."
walking away now.
I
I'm
nearly did that on Saturday.
So that's quite hard.
The fact that people with farms or any family business to be able to just say, hand in your notice and leave. You have agency, don't you, within that system, whereas within a farm you don't have agency, so that can contribute to poor mental health.
Yeah.
I did. Oh, the story of when the son turned up and just like pushed an envelope towards his dad and went, "I'm leaving. I want a payout. You owe me £1 million."
So how did the meat sale business come about? How did that start? Whose idea was it?
So I'll
So-
do
so
the
you
background, and then
yeah.
these two do the more
Yeah.
Susan
now,
can
and
do the
then
background.
Susan can do it. So they always used to sell meat to people from the farm,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
But since I don't know how long you've been doing it now. 10 years?
COVID.
No.
COVID, maybe a bit before.
COVID got us more professional, probably.
Yeah, and then we started doing 3 daughters
Yeah.
meat boxes. Go for it, Susan.
So yeah, Mum and Dad, we used to have. Well, did we even get a full bullet back? Would it often be
Yeah,
half
yeah.
a bullet? And
Yeah,
they'd
just
it'd
randomly.
get chopped up. Lovely
By a
Eric.
butcher?
Yeah,
By a
lovely
butcher.
Eric would chop it up. But there'd be like 6 or 7 people that would come and get
The
meat,
same
and
people.
then the same people. And Mum and Dad would give meat away to friends, wouldn't they, at Christmas and birthdays and stuff. And then I don't know what. I think I kind of started getting involved in that, and then thought, this has
Hang
got
on,
legs here. We could do something with this. Not inventing that, it's done all over the country,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
world,
yeah.
but just thinking this is something that we could possibly do. and just started putting word out there, and it was just really word of mouth. We've got this available if people are interested, and then that sort of started developing, and then we were getting more and more people, and then we just, I still wouldn't say we're overly professional about it, but we started getting a bit more organised about it, didn't we? And then that kind of brought Instagram into being, which I think has been a really positive thing in bringing people in and learning about what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it might just be a funny post one day, another day it might be something informative about what we're doing around the year, so people can see the life of a farm throughout the year and what's going on. And then recently, the last year, the pub has started buying our meat, but having it on specials boards because we don't produce enough to provide them.
And for everyone listening, obviously, because I've already interviewed Kate, it is a busy pub, isn't it?
Yeah, really busy pub. So they tend to put our meat on specials boards and sell it as Three Daughters meat, which I think...
But the excitement of this menu is we got on the menu.
Are we on the main menu
We're
this
actually
time?
on the main menu.
And is the
mutton.
hope to get into other pubs, or where do you want that? Where would you like that?
My dream is that all of our animals would go into
No supply.
Local
supply rather than...
Okay.
That's
So
how-
we can
how
either
long
reduce
away-
the number of animals we have
Yeah,
or
the
get better at
practicality of that dream
Yeah.
is not.
But we probably 3 or 4 bullocks a year at the moment.
And how many do we produce?
40.
So
It's just not quite 10%.
yeah.
Lambs would be less than 10%, and then pigs we get weaners from my friend James and rear them up, so that's going to shift slightly. But yeah, that's where the pigs come from, and then I did a few pastured chickens last year as a bit of a trial as well. A focus area that we started last year but need to develop this year, which is getting more people, a range of people onto the farm, and that, yes, lovely if they buy some steak, but actually it's also about getting a wider community of people onto the farm to understand farming more and making different choices. It could be that they might not eat red meat, but because of they've been to us, they have a better appreciation of where they might buy their veg from, or what do they need to look for in terms of production systems now. It's not just about us selling our meat, it's about more communication about farming and taking responsible decisions about where your food comes from, which is what has led us into where we are now anyway.
But that does also need to translate into money for you somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because obviously you've got to give up your time for that. And I guess if you're creating a brand that has commercial value in a few different forms, that's how you can, because obviously you naturally want to do it, you can do it. There's a cost to, photographing it, videoing, everything you want to do. There's a cost to that, and then putting out.
I think
you've got
that's
to be able to make
another.
money off that.
And I think we now need. We have probably saturated the market we're in, so we've now got to take a decision whether we want to ramp it up one. And my experience of working with other farmers who are posting meat out is a tedious job in terms of couriers. So it still would be local, but it could be that, like Susan's idea of having a pop-up shop of like when we have more stuff, we can do like a little farm shop every quarter or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
So there's other ideas we can bring in. It's sort of going, right, we've got to where we are, we now need to take the next step up. I think, and I suppose, although I have said about money quite a lot, but I think it also fits that we're not searching for notoriety or fame, we're searching for purpose. So for me, I have greater purpose in developing a farm where some farmers might want to come and learn stuff than I do necessarily being in the Sunday Times.
On that note, I'm going to say thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. Edit that is what I'm going to say. Good luck.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and/or this role, then please go to our website www.thiswomanswork.org. The link is on this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.